You're listening to
They're going to call it a hard foul. They're going to call it a hard foul.
We are a hard foul. We're back after a week, and we're brought to you by the what?
Fan First Sports Network, bitch.
That's right, Biatch. Mike, a bit of news today. Shams Karadia reported earlier that Jaylen Brown had surgery to clean up his knee. All reports indicate that he's going to be back for the start of the regular season. We're going to get into that. We're going to get into some Jayson Tatum discussion, some rumors around there that aren't really new news, but a little bit of updated reporting on some of the rumors surrounding the Celtics trades. We'll touch on the Knicks firing of Tom Thibodeau and their search thereafter, the finals, and Kevin Durant. We'll try to hit on all this stuff rather quickly. But Mike, starting with the Jaylen Brown news, quite the opposite picture of last year when we were raising the trophy, and this year both star players end up surgery for, in Jaylen Brown's case, minor knee repair, and with Jayson Tatum, obviously, with the Achilles. What are your initial thoughts there? What, any concerns or anything like that?
No, it doesn't seem like we have to have concerns. The feeling kind of stinks. Both these guys, Tatum really got hurt, couldn't play, and Brown was playing through an injury. So just about the same team as last year, and this is where we are. And it's why teams in the NBA don't repeat anymore. It's really hard to make it back to the championship. So tough, but the good news is, sounds like he'll be good to go. So that's good for Brown.
Yeah, no, definitely good to go. And Mike, you just speak up a little bit when you go in here. I don't think there's any real concerns. I think the fact that he'll be ready to go is good news for the Celtics. I don't think it hurts any trade value for him, if that's even a thing anymore. Shams Karadia did report today, Mike. I don't know if you saw this, that the Celtics, is still interested in just trading Hauser, White, and Porzingis, but they have listened on not Hauser, White, and Porzingis. I'm sorry, Hauser, Holiday, and Porzingis are the priorities for the Celtics to move. But they have listened to offers, I guess, or people are calling with big offers, I think is how he said it, on both White and Brown. I don't know if you caught that earlier today, but it's nothing really in terms of new news, but I do think it's somewhat interesting.
Yeah, I mean, none of it's really surprising news. I think we expected this to happen. They're going to get calls on White and Brown. Hauser, Porzingis, and Holiday obviously aren't as attractive as those two players. So White and Brown are going to be the players that teams are interested in, especially if the news about Giannis is true. So the offers for White and Brown are just going to go up dramatically if Giannis isn't available this offseason.
Yeah, I think so. I think the fact that he even squeezed that in there, that they're listening on those or receiving calls on that, means the door is absolutely not shut. And the other thing I found interesting is, so the Celtics, I think, to get below both aprons, it's about 30, somewhere between 30 and 33 million. They need to shed. There's definitely an avenue to do that if if the priority is trading the first three guys of Porzingis, Holiday, and Hauser. Because you could trade Hauser into someone's mid-level exception and get back maybe a top 15, top 20 protected first-round pick. Maybe you move Holiday and then you figure out a way to move Porzingis. And even if you're not shedding their full salaries off the book and it's only partial, you could find a way where you're at that number. And then to me, that was just interesting, that part of it, where those are the priority. And what he didn't articulate, and I wish I was there to ask the question, is it, they looking to trade all three of them, or is it the priority is some combination thereof? Because that kind of gives you a different perspective, right? If it's some combination thereof, then it's, just trying to get under the second apron. If your objective is to trade all three, then it sounds like there's a mandate from ownership to get under both aprons. So I found that part of it very interesting. It's still somewhat unclear, but it did, at least my takeaway was, is they're trying to get under that first apron too, from what Shams is reporting. Obviously not 100% clear, but that's what my thought was.
Yeah, it would make sense that they're trying to probably keep White, Brown, and Tatum as the foundation and get under it by moving either a combination of the two guys or all three. Which, I mean, it would make sense that they may be trying to get out of Holiday's contract where he's older and kind of reset this thing too with White, Brown, and Tatum when Tatum comes back, and just have a competitive season next year with White and Brown out there, and whatever you surround them with maybe you bring back Cornette and some young players and kind of go from there. I think it's okay to not look at Holiday, KP, and Hauser as future pieces. I think if they can move on, now is probably a good time to.
Yeah, I think so. Again, if you're looking to get under the first apron, it's just not for this season. So even if you hold on to White and Brown coming back the following year, there's not going to be a lot of room to build on that team with Tatum. I find it just that part of it disheartening to me. If it's like you're not, there's no real reason other than to save a few bucks to just get under it for one season. Getting under two resets you. So like we talked about, I guess, ad nauseum in the last pod. So that to me, with new ownership, that would be a little bit disappointing. The only caveat I would say to that is unless they feel like you're not going to have a championship team for a while, so it makes sense to get under both and try to build from there. And once you have a championship team, you'll spend. But I don't think that argument's all that convincing because I think there is a pathway to be a championship contender by not going under that first apron. So
Yeah,
we'll see what happens, I guess.
I hear what you're saying. It may not be that too. I mean, they could be looking at this and saw some holes in the way this team played, and they want to see if they can reorganize this roster a little bit to, in their eyes, be better when Tatum gets back. We don't know if they move Holiday and they get whatever they get back, but maybe they're able to sign somebody next offseason that puts them over that apron, or they extend to Luke Cornette as part of their plans.
Right.
They hold on. Yeah. So we don't know everything. I tend to think that Porzingis, Holiday, and Hauser can be replaceable. And even if you get players that are a little bit less, you still have a good enough core to really compete at this thing, especially with the way injuries now are in the NBA.
In the East, right?
What'd you say?
In the East.
In the East too, right? So I'm not sure hope is dead like I felt on the last pod. If they keep Jaylen Brown and Derek White around, I'm ready to reset this thing and trust Brad to make some moves and to draft some good players in here and see where we are in 2 years. Next year might be rough, but they could still be a playoff team.
Yeah, I think it's going to be tough. I think it'll be tough to reset. We'll have to see what it looks like. I think it would be tough to reset with those three and then having really no wiggle room to upgrade your team outside of the draft. But maybe that's good enough. Teams have certainly done that before. You would need to get lucky. And then it would also, I think a lot of it depend upon what those Holiday and Porzingis deals look like. There are rumors out there now that the Celtics are looking for a first round pick back for Holiday. I would imagine you would have to send something out with Porzingis at this point. Um, I still tend to think this is where I just wish the onus wasn't just get under the first apron. I hope it's just not that because I still think Porzingis has more value to you to not trade.
I
Um,
do too.
he's an expiring contract. He's off the books next year. If you can find a way to just get under that second apron and he's going to walk anyways, why, he could potentially, there's a real chance you give up a first round pick, you send him to a contender, and he's playing real minutes and being effective in the playoffs next year. Especially based
I,
on how he played down the stretch, and if this
I agree.
virus thing is just a fluke.
And I almost see that there may be more value in keeping him and not trading him because he may be the type of player that when his contract is up, he doesn't have a ton of value in free agency. There isn't a ton of money out there when players hit free agency, and you may be able to sign him at a really friendly contract when this contract is up. So I don't know. I mean, they have a lot of decisions to make. And we've seen this team make it to the Eastern Conference Finals with lesser talent. So, and the other thing I give the Celtics credit to through this process is they've drafted well. They've drafted well for a long time now. You go back to Grant Williams, Robert Williams, Aaron Nesmith, Peyton Pritchard. If they never traded Desmond Bain, they drafted him too. They've done a really good job with drafting first round picks. And
You know who made all those picks, though?
Danny,
Yeah, and the other one, I guess,
Austin Ainge is gone.
yeah. So like, it's you like to think with Mike Zarin and Brad, you're still in pretty good hands. But like Shyman looks like it was a hit last year, but there really isn't a track record of draft picks under this regime. That's
No,
that's really an unknown at this point.
Shyman's the only first round draft pick Brad's had.
Yeah,
But Brad was the coach throughout that regime, right? He was the coach going back to Marcus Smart, and the Celtics really hit on all those picks. So, I think obviously we have to hope that that's the case moving forward here because these two draft picks in this draft, I feel like are very important. End of the first round, second pick of the second round. Maybe that second round pick they don't pick and they trade back for future assets, but they got to hit on that first round pick. Maybe even they trade up. Maybe that's something they look at too. But I think this is an important draft this year.
yeah, and there's rumors out there right now that they're looking at point guards, which would make sense. There's not a lot of depth with the Celtics right now beyond Peyton Pritchard. Real NBA depth, anyways.
Yeah, I don't like
So
that. I don't like that rumor though. I do not think a team like the Celtics, who aren't in a position to win a championship next year, should be drafting for position. They should be drafting the best player available. That's how they should be looking at this thing. That's how I feel, anyways. Because you just need a point guard to get you through the season next year.
oh, maybe
You know?
there's not a lot there even long term, and you don't have a lot of ways. Like, let's say they do what you are thinking, they're going to keep White and Brown and Tatum. Well, there's not a lot of ways to bring in a starter level point guard onto this team.
Mm-hmm.
Like maybe someone does you the real favor and say you're a championship team when I want to play in Boston. But that's
Yeah, his name's Marcus Smart when his contract's up.
well, I don't know if he played at a starter level last year. Maybe at times in Washington, certainly not in Memphis. Um,
That's true. That's true.
so like I don't know where that bargain would come from, but there's not a lot of depth there. Like there's also not a lot of depth at this point, anyways, at the center position. Especially if you're moving on from Porzingis and Al's leaving. So I think those two positions are positions of need. And maybe there's other ways to get them down the line, but I think there is probably a good reason to, obviously if a great player falls to you and he's a wing, you don't blink at that. But I think at that point in the draft, looking at a position of need probably isn't the worst thing.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. I think we wait to see. I mean, like when Rob Williams fell to Danny that year, I mean, what a steal that ended up being for that draft. Um, so yeah, I mean, these are big things, and I think the other guy is really Sharman's development. He looks like the type of guy who might be able to play with the ball in his hands, and
Yeah, that's a
and
good point. Yeah,
what is his role next year? What is his actual position on this team?
he's a bit of a
Um,
playmaker for sure. Yeah, and he's going to get minutes, Mike, especially if Hauser is on his way out. Minutes are going to, no doubt, they're going to be there for him next year.
I think that's a smarter move. I didn't see a lot from Hauser this season that I loved. I really didn't. I thought he was much better last season than he was this season, and a lot of back injury problems. I I know his contract is great, but I think they're making the right move here by maybe moving on from Hauser and looking at that position again.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a position of luxury and they didn't have to like get below these tax levels and whatnot,
Yeah, keep him.
you keep them. Move shooters don't fall from trees. There's very few of them in the league that can do what he does, that skill set that he has, and you will miss it. Like this is one of those things where you say, "Oh well, he's gone. We'll be fine." You're gonna miss that if you're a really good team. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
on the championship run, he was huge. I do think like he got a little bit more exposed on defense last year, where teams realized to not go ISO and slow at him, but instead grab the ball and go quick. He struggled with that a bit more. His back injury was a thing, and maybe that's a concern going forward. But
That's my concern with him.
you, but undoubtedly you will miss him, because Shireman has a lot of skills that Hauser doesn't have, I think. He's more of a playmaker. Like you said, more of the ball in your hands type of guy.
But he's
But
not Sam Hauser.
no, he's not. He like that ability, just flying off a screen, falling away, catch it and release right away. I mean, there's not a lot of guys that can do that. And that's why a bunch of them made a shitload of money, a few years ago. So we'll see. I think the positive, I guess, if we want to talk about positive, at least there's an opportunity to, I don't think he'd be hard to move and to get off that salary. I think there'll be a demand. Anyone that's a contender is going to want a guy like Sam Hauser. You look around the league at contenders, and not many, if any, really have a player with that skill set on their team. So
Certainly
he's not a
Houston.
negative defender either.
Yeah, certainly Houston. Although Ime would refuse to play him, so I don't know. Never mind.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, what team wouldn't want him?
Maybe Ime doesn't. I didn't
Yeah,
understand why Hauser didn't play
yeah,
during that championship run.
maybe.
But
Yeah, well, I mean, it was his first year. Like, I don't know, but so we'll see what happens. But it does sound like they're looking to move him, and that will certainly open up opportunities for guys like Shireman and potentially whoever the Celtics take in the draft this year. The other bit of news, so Shams kind of alluded to the fact they wanted to do this, he said, before the draft, and then kind of caught himself, but also going into free agency. So my guess is as soon as these finals end, um, things are really
oh
going to
yeah,
ramp up for the
oh yeah,
Celtics, and we're going to get a sense of the direction they're going and what's going to happen. But I'm
yeah.
for. Go ahead.
There's no more live announcements with Jim Gray. I'm going to Miami announcements in the NBA anymore. All this stuff happens right away.
No, and there's not even real free agent. Like, there's not like great players in free agency anymore. They all get locked up and then traded. This is kind of what happens.
Yeah.
Um, I do want to say, just in terms of Holiday, it does feel like he's all but gone at this point. In terms of everyone that's on the Celtics roster, it seems like he seems to be the definite guy that's going to be moved, and there seems, when you start hearing the Celtics want a first round pick, you imagine there's a pretty decent market for him out there. Um,
Uh-huh.
he, I know he struggled after the hamstring injury mightily in that series against the Knicks, but I just hope people don't forget how huge he was during that run last year. At times, you could have said he was the second best player on the court. Um, During the playoffs, the finals runs, particularly in that Pacers series, he was just awesome. He was awesome in the finals. Um, for that one season, he was worth everything we gave up, and
Oh yeah,
an absolute joy to watch. And hopefully, he continues playing for a couple more years at a high level, wherever he ends up.
yeah. No, I agree. I mean, we can certainly how after it happens, we can revisit Holiday's impact on the championship run on a pod. But I think I'm not going to be really sad that they made this move. I think this is smart for the Celtics to do this with Tatum out next year. If you can get a first round pick for Holiday, if you can get more than that, that would be unbelievable. But if you can add another asset here, I think you have to do it. I
Yeah,
really do.
if you're able to get a pick, it would even ease the blow if you then, feel like you definitely have to move Porzingis and you have to send something out. Obviously, that would ease that blow of doing that a little bit. Um, but we'll see what happens there. Mike, the other news that could affect the Celtics, it's not Celtics news, but Giannis on a podcast yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
um, kind of indicated that he wants to win a title and win one with the Bucks.
Yep.
He didn't definitively say that he's staying in Milwaukee. I don't think this is a huge surprise, but
No,
I think it's good news for the league, to be honest with you.
he's always wanted to be in Milwaukee, and um, yeah, I think it's good for the league. Yeah, it's why until he became like a really dirty player, I always loved Giannis,
Yeah.
especially during that championship season. He was unbelievable. Um, yeah, I think it's good for Milwaukee too. Milwaukee, I said it on an earlier pod, like they don't have to trade him. They could try to reset. Everybody has an opportunity to try to figure things out in the NBA. They're in a real tough spot now.
Yeah, they don't have any picks at all. Yeah.
Like Christmas ago, really destroyed all their future plans, and they don't have any picks at all. But you never know. James Dolan's in charge of the New York Knicks again. You got idiots running Washington. You got idiots running a lot of franchises. I think there's always hope in the NBA because somebody's going to get fleeced somewhere.
Well,
So
Washington seems to be like they're a little bit better run than they have been. But yeah, no, you're right. There's always an opportunity to fleece, and yeah, even if they traded Giannis, it'd be so hard to get back into contention because of everything they've given up, and there's really no good young players there. Um,
yeah, I mean, you move Brooke Lopez and Bobby Portis and see,
yeah,
maybe you reset a little bit and just Giannis isn't going anywhere, so let him do his thing and get MVP awards and the next like 3 years, maybe you get something in there. I don't know. It's better than blowing it up.
well,
To
I agree.
have Giannis.
I think from the Bucks' perspective, you have just as good a chance, probably better, much better chance of being a championship contender in 2, 3 seasons with Giannis, even under your current circumstances, than trading him, getting some stuff in. Um, because once you lose him under the circumstances you are in right now, it could be a long while before there's quality basketball in Milwaukee. So I think this is good for the Celtics. I think this is good for the league. Um,
And Washington's looking to get out of that Jordan Poole contract. Um, maybe I don't know if they're doing it to shed money or what it is, but maybe you attach a few second round picks to Damian Lillard and you get back a guy who can actually play. They you never know what you can do in the NBA. It doesn't make them a championship team, but they'll be back in the playoffs. And, people will be able to watch Giannis do his thing.
mhm. Yeah, and obviously, as far as how it affects the Celtics, if the Celtics were getting big offers before, this kind of helps their leverage because he now becomes, in terms of Jaylen Brown, if they were considering moving him or if they were just willing to listen, um, he becomes the best possibility on the market for teams, both in terms of free agency and out there in trade. So I said to you on this pod before, and you've said it, like if the Celtics got to trade him, it's got to be a ransom, right? It's got to be a really good young player, at least one really good young player that has a potential to be an all-star or an all NBA player, like either defensively or otherwise, and some, high level picks at bare minimum.
Yeah.
And so this really upset ante quite a bit because the next best guy would be Durant, who, obviously helpful in his own right, really good player. But I think Brown's value outpaces Durant at this point in their careers. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think it all depends on the team and need there a little bit. But yeah, I mean, where do you think is a fit for Durant?
where doesn't he fit? He's the type of guy where if you say a team to me right now, like
I think it's Denver.
Denver, sure. If they
Try to
can do
move
it,
Michael
yeah.
Porter.
Minnesota would be great. The Knicks,
Minnesota's going to be trying to shed money though.
the Knicks would work. And they've been rumored. So I think this Houston would certainly work. So where he wouldn't work, I don't know. He's not the same defensive guy that he used to be, but if you're looking for someone that can give you 25 to 30 a night, still be a really good player, and I don't think he's a guy that's gonna lead you to a championship, but anymore at this point in his career. But he's certainly a guy that on a good team could be really, really helpful.
Yeah, I think it would be good for him and the Denver Nuggets for him to end up there. Denver doesn't have a guy outside of Jokic. And, Murray isn't as reliable as he used to be that can just get buckets in the half court. And Michael Porter Jr. has been such an inconsistent shooter out there. You have some draft picks, give up a few first round picks, overpay. I think you get Kevin Durant healthy in the playoffs with Jokic. Um, you're right back in title contention.
Yeah, maybe. I think that's definitely a possibility. I think that team needs some depth help as well. I think if you start trading away guys and you start in five for Durant and you still don't have depth with the way Durant's injury history has been, and Murray getting a year older with a lot of miles, it could be setting yourself up to be in a really tough situation come the spring.
Well,
Uh,
that's why drafting's so important.
yeah.
And they haven't drafted well.
No, they haven't drafted well, and they got cheap too, right? They're one of those teams
Mhm.
that won't spend deep into the tax, and it's really hurt the ability, with the depth. So, yeah, the Durant stuff is interesting. Right now he's the biggest name out there, unless, you know,
It's
um,
something we don't know. Somebody else is
yeah,
gambling. Yeah.
and obviously you got to keep an eye on what's going on here in Boston. Mike, we're 2 games into the NBA Finals.
How
Um,
are we only 2 games in? The Eastern Conference Finals ended like fucking a month ago.
I know they're playing every third day right now, which does suck because the first
I
game was
feel
so
like this is,
great, and I feel like the
yeah,
momentum for that first game is just gone now.
it is. And I feel like the NBA like screwed themselves here with all this lag time that people have lost a ton of interest.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I,
Uh,
I don't
yeah.
really understand the schedule at all. It's stupid. I played these games, you almost forgot what happened from game one going into game two because it was such a gap.
Yep.
Um, what are your thoughts, Mike? It looks like Oklahoma City found their groove and they look just dominant in game two after kind of giving it up in game one.
Yeah. Oklahoma City hasn't been good on the road playoffs. So Um, they're much different at home. All their blowouts, their big epic blowouts, typically at home.
Hmm.
And so I give Indiana a shot to make this a deep series. I really do at this point. I feel like they'll probably go back. I think it's going to go back to OKC 2-2, but that makes it a 6 game series. So these are entertaining games, and you not being able to beat a team in game one when they turn the ball over as many times as they did.
19 times at halftime.
Yeah, that
Insane.
makes
Yeah.
that gives a team a shot to win the championship. So, um, oh, I'm sure Game 3 will be really good and be really entertaining. But I still do think OKC takes this in 6 games. So
Yeah, I think you're right with 6. Game one was so interesting because they didn't score a ton off those OKC turnovers. And in fact, they would turn it over a couple times. I mean, off those Indiana turnovers, and OKC would turn it over and give it right back to them, or settle for shots that you wouldn't see OKC take. And you know, OKC was just so dominant in that first half defensively against Indiana in game one. And Indiana, I felt like kept making the mistake of wanting to play like the Pacers, um, which is, the extra passes and the drives. And like that just, it's oh, the problem with being the Pacers is and doing things like that is OKC's it plays right into what they do best, and they're much better at what they do best than what you do best on
Uh-huh.
offense, which is just, being pariahs once that ball gets to the paint, and being in passing lanes and everywhere. What OKC gives up, and they're fine giving up, is kind of shots early and those corner threes. Indiana started taking them in the fourth, shot really well from three, shot early in three, even did some ISO threes with Nemhot, and then try to do that in game two. And that's kind of the problem with playing OKC is if you're not making them consistently, there's not a lot of other ways to score
Uh-huh.
unless you're super skilled, like with superstars. And so it's gonna be interesting to see Indiana's approach tonight. Do they stick with kind of early shots? Do they try to design some stuff so they can get the ball moving a little bit, but don't go into the teeth of this defense? It's it's really hard um to get out on transition against OKC too. That's the other thing. Like it's these things are just difficult. So if you're approaching this offensively from Indiana's perspective, Mike, what do you do? Like, I still think you look for that early shot and early offense against these guys, and hope for the best. But I don't know. Maybe there's a better plan.
I think what I've seen this series is that Indiana's best player, as far as not turning the ball over and being strong with the ball and winning one-on-one matchups, has been Nimhard. And I would try to get him going early in the game, him and Halliburton, to win some of those one-on-one matchups that OKC is willing to lose. Because if Nimhard gets his mid-range game going, that really opens up a lot for Indiana. And I feel like that was a big part of the second half comeback. Um, and he might be a key player in this series because he's been showing the ability to win that matchup against OKC and not turn the ball over and not be weak with the ball. So I'd look at that. And then also, talking to Siakam, this is the type of guy that never has to find his offense. It just comes to him and say to him, maybe in this series, we need you to find it. We need you to go ISO a little bit more, similar to what you used to do in Toronto, um, in, in this series in particular. So, that and yeah, I agree. The early shots are important against OKC.
Yeah, you can't be. I think you have to shoot 40 plus threes against these guys, um, to really give yourself a chance. Maybe I'm wrong, but I just think you have to. And the other thing that was interesting is the OKC didn't really go double big at all in game one, which I'm not sure they went to it once. They didn't stop with it, which was
Well,
weird.
that was a big difference
Yeah,
in game
yeah.
two.
They went to it in game two, and I felt like they dominated those minutes when they went to it in game two. Um, I it was kind of like I couldn't figure out if they thought Holmgren couldn't cover Siakam, and I still don't know why they would think that he couldn't. He seems very comfortable covering anybody. He's really
Well,
friggin'
here's the
good
thing,
at
though,
that.
Jim. In game one, it was working out. They just couldn't capitalize on all the fucking turnovers they were causing.
Yeah,
Um,
but I thought it hurt their offense.
yeah. But hey, I'm at my kid's school. I gotta pick him up. So I gotta cut the pod here, Jim.
All right, so we'll go from here. The next thing, NBA Finals will complete soon, and then we're going to be looking at the draft, Mike. So we'll talk to everybody soon.
All right, stop, drop, kaboom. James Dolan rubs on his nipples.
Trying to
Yeah,
find
we
a
didn't
coach.
even get to the next clusterfuck of a coaching search.
Call
For the next
every
pod.
coach. Kev, call every coach that isn't available in the NBA.
Yeah.
Super plan.
Yeah.
Super plan.
Yeah. Talk to everyone.
Yeah.